Hello, everyone. You're all very welcome back to The Chirp, a podcast where we chat about how relationships have been affected by money and loans and how we all learn from these experiences. If this is your first time watching or listening to The Chirp, please give us a follow, a subscribe, a like, leave us a review, whatever you can do to show us the love. We release new episodes every 2 weeks, and doing all that enables us to be on your front porch, ready to be consumed on the day. This week, I had the pleasure of speaking with my very, very old best friend, Mr. Geoff Spearin. Geoff works in Panama for Diageo, which is a multinational alcohol beverage company, and he is a business development manager for cruise ships and airlines. Now, while we conducted this interview on opposite sides of the globe, it was the same as being in the same room with one another. Me and Geoff grew up together, and I knew he'd make an excellent guest on The Chirp as, coming up as kids, we saw lots of relationships being strained by money and loans. I've known Geoff for nearly 20 years now, so it was great to have him on the show and to hear some old tales of loans with friends and those friends putting a spanner in the works sometimes, some tales more recent than others. So let's dive straight into the interview and allow me to introduce my old comrade, Geoff. Geoff, thank you so much for chatting to me today. How goes it in Panama at the moment?
Hey Cameron, how are things? Panama goes well. I am currently on a small island off the coast of Panama called Bocas del Toro. So I've temporarily relocated in the digital nomad opportunity that I'm being given at the moment, which is great fun. So I'm here for another 2-3 weeks.
Are there many digital nomads where you are at the moment? Is it kind of a little hub for them? Or did you find this, how did you even find this little island
I
off the coast
I
of
actually
Panama?
came I came to Bocas a year ago, October last year. It was the very first day Panama opened. It was like the first place where there was almost no restrictions. However, we flew out here. It's like a 30-minute flight from Panama City. All the restaurants were closed. All the hotels were closed. The only place was open was where we were staying. So that's how we found it. But very much it's like a digital hub center. A lot of Americans, a lot of people coming from Latin America as well. So you get an eclectic mix of people. Like I'm in a co-working for the last 2 weeks, and it's super busy. It's a lot of people. So it's nice. The only thing we have is rolling blackouts, which you got to be careful for.
What are they? As in like electricity gonzo?
If it rains too hard, the electricity's gone for a day, 2 days. We were where we used to live before here. We were on a small beach called Playa Venao, and the power would go out for like 2 or 3 days at a time, and then we'd have to like figure out how to get work done and stuff. There was one hotel that had a generator that we used to be able to get to.
That would fill me with so much anxiety if you had shit to do, if you've stuff to do during the day and you're like, oh, I'm sorry, boss, please don't fire me. I don't have any electricity. Never mind any Wi-Fi. How did you explain that?
I like how you thought about work. I thought about food. I was like, my fridge freezer is gone. All my food is destroyed. What am I going to do? How am I going to eat? So I like you were like, how am I going to keep my job? I was like, how am I going to keep fed? So
frozen veg.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's okay. As I said, there's like 2 hotels that had generators where we could like make base camp out of and get our work done. But it was more that it gets dark at 6 o'clock every day. So there's no like daylight savings in Panama. So you basically, once it goes 6 o'clock, it's dark, and you need the flash lights out because there's no street lights where we were. It was a really small beach town. There was one road in, one road out, like 5 shops and a couple of hotels.
So Geoff, tell me how you ended up in Panama. Obviously, for our listeners at home, we grew up in Dublin, Ireland together. I'm now based in Spain. You're now based in Panama. You've been abroad and working abroad a lot longer than I have. So can you tell me a little bit how you went from, us finishing school and finishing college in Dublin to going all the way to Panama?
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be like a journey that had 1,000 stops along the way, but each one was like hugely significant. If it hadn't have been for a single journey, I probably wouldn't have ended up where I am. And it all really started with taking up Spanish in university and then going away for a year abroad and learning Spanish in a small town called Ciudad Real. So I think once you've lived abroad and you have that independence, it's something that you want to maintain and keep at any given cost. And I think we both
Hmm.
know that renting in Dublin at the moment, and certainly for the last number of years, has been outside of our reach. So looking at,
Absolutely.
like, it was just absolutely crazy, and it's indicative of where all of our friends live as well. And we could go on a whole other podcast about where everyone's at the moment. But
All
for me,
four
that was
corners of the globe.
all four corners, certainly. So for me, there was Spain was the first element or first taste of freedom. Then obviously had the language capabilities, and I managed to maintain those. Finished university and really wanted to get out and explore the world again, and was offered a job in Florida working in a private members country club, which was great fun. But
Hmm.
it was crazy tough work. A small town called Vero Beach. Made some amazing friends for life. It's where I've met my current fiance. So it left a good imprint. And as a result, America's always been close to my heart. So that
Yes.
again kind of fed into what I wanted to do. I was being a bartender there. I wanted to move into the brand ambassadorial world. And while I was living in Vero Beach in the US, I applied for a job as a brand ambassador, subsequently got the job, lived in London for about 2 years while I was doing that. And then the company had set up an Irish whiskey distillery in Dublin, relocated to Dublin, moved in with my folks because that was all we could afford to do at the time. I mean, renting
Yeah.
again was crazy. My girlfriend at the time was studying in her final year of college. So we both weren't working full time, which of course makes things super challenging financially. And I was at a conference in France at an Irish bar, and I bumped into the gentleman who is now my manager. I was hosting an event, and we got talking, and he took my card and added me on LinkedIn the old fashioned way. And a
Hashtag
couple of weeks
networking.
later, hashtag networking, exactly. A couple of weeks later, I got an inbox to say hi. I'm the head of America's. Would you be interested in relocating? And after much deliberation and not a lot of knowledge around Panama, I figured it was like a perfect storm of being able to pick up Spanish, being closer to America, challenging myself in a new role with a new company. And I have to say, I've absolutely loved it. Even though I moved here 3 days or 4 days before the pandemic like really kicked in,
Hmm.
I have to
Hmm.
say, Panama is it's a tremendous place. It's definitely a hidden gem. Like most people think of the canal, but there's a lot to love and appreciate around here as well.
We've definitely had, we've been blessed, I think, the pair of us, growing up together as well. And our family homes being quite close, that we always have had kind of that safety net to fall back on should things be going awry. Especially with accommodation now. But there's one thing, and there's one thing I love about you, and um when we grew up together and went to school and dare I say became men together. Was
Of
the kind of
course.
the similarity we always have was we always had to work as soon as we could, growing up as teenagers, because we weren't getting any handouts from the family. Um, so I'm keen to ask you, because obviously, here you are. It's been a long and winding road, always ascending, might I add, and I know that because I know you so well. But how has working from such a young age and earning from such a young age shaped how you handle your money and your finances today?
I think it's two things. One is, what were we, 16 years old in 2008? So like we became part of a sort of generation that were at an age where you really understand, like, or somewhat understand finances and money, and what money can get you and what the value of
Yeah,
it is in some
and
capacity.
not to
So
mention the recession happening as well.
so that's my point, which is the 2008 is
Mm,
obviously the huge financial crisis. So obviously that had a huge bearing in like our then value and how we think money works for us. So as you said, like there wasn't a lot going around back then, and I was lucky that I had done a couple of shifts in different bars from the age of 15. Actually, I'd started, so that became like a my dad always remember him telling me that bartending is like a trade. You can really bring it anywhere around the world, and like again, every journey has got me to where I am. And if I hadn't begun bartending to get me through college, to get me my kind of money that I needed, I wouldn't have gone to Florida to become a bartender. I wouldn't have become a brand ambassador, and I could be living somewhere completely differently. So it all kind of circles back around in that respect. But
mm,
I think everyone should work in either hospitality or retail. I think having something that's your own, and earning, and working as part of a team in any capacity at an early age helps kind of form really good habits. And I think the formation of those good habits drives how you then want to spend and utilize your money,
yeah.
and how you plan to use your money. Because I've worked in 0 hour contracts, and I've worked where minimum wage jobs, and I worked in jobs where you could just be doing events, like all different bartending things, and it was extremely hard to say, "Oh, I'll manage here and I'll try and do this." And like there was no eToro, there was no Robin Hood, there was no real way of kind of understanding what my money could be used for, other than going out with friends and spending it frivolously. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what we did. But I think from an early age, it put in the right markers to say, okay, I do enjoy having my own finances. I do enjoy actually managing these myself. Um, but like any 18 to 20 something year old would do, you still manage to spend it on. For me, it was always about traveling, whether that was interrailing, summers abroad, various different aspects that I always wanted to do. I wanted to get out there and see a bit of the world. And I was very lucky to be able to afford that through different jobs. So, I mean, yourself, like, how have you always found, what was your first job? Can you remember?
I worked in a supermarket in Dublin called Tesco's. That was my very first job. I was 16
Very close to
and
home.
I was very close to home, right beside my house. I had, I was very blessed, and I definitely, well, like I quit after a few months, but it was ridiculous. I think I was on like €11 an hour as well, which
That's
for a
ridiculous.
16-year-old, yeah, it was, because no other 16-year-old was working when I was working, and I had to, because the recession was it hit hard,
Yeah.
but and it's funny you say that, because we did used to. I think when we were all kind of 18 and going forward from that, we all were working. But it's one thing that I've, you know, always spoken about, is the fact that we all grew up having to lend each other money. We all grew up having to, sort out a kind of a roster of loans, if you will, between between each other. Because if we didn't, there would have been a couple of people left by the wayside who wouldn't have been able to go out partying, which I suppose was the main focus of those years, wasn't it?
I mean, there would be no point in going out if your best friends couldn't join it with you, right? That was what we wanted
Exactly.
to
Yeah.
do. And one person would be getting paid the following Friday, and the next person the following Friday, and it was always just sort of handed back and dealt back. And I mean, we made it work. We shared a lot of great formed lifelong friendships throughout those years.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, I always see it, like either it's on Instagram or Facebook. Who do you know more than 5 years? I'm thinking, I know some of these old friends like 15 years at this stage, and we're all
Yeah.
really, really close still. And I think, I don't know whether our secret loan system worked back then, and that's what helped galvanize us. But
Oh, it definitely helped. Definitely helped. And I think as well, what was a big you know, contributor was the fact that we were students as well, and going out and having these incredibly cheap drinks, and not having to pay too much to get into the nightclubs and things like that. But I think today, would said loan system work with all of us, if we were to go out to our haunts these days? I think I think the numbers would be a lot larger.
the numbers would be larger, but it'd be a lot easier, right? Nowadays, it's like we didn't even have proper mobile phones, really. Like, what could we do?
No.
Basically, text each other by pressing letters certain numbers three times to get each individual letter. Like nowadays, you can
Yeah.
do it 100 different ways, 100 different apps, send people
Yeah.
money, keep track of it a hell of a lot better. Like I'm sure there's certain money that went under the radar, but I think even with lending friends money, it can always be a little bit of a risk. But there's a great quote, and I think it's in A Bronx Tale, and he's talking about how, like, oh, I gave this guy $20. He's like, so what? If you never give it back to you, you got rid of the guy for $20. So I
Yeah.
haven't taken that approach with all my friends, but I've definitely given money to people in the past, thinking like, "Oh, cool, no problem. We're friends. Like, you'll get that back to me," and they've
Yeah.
ghosted you or they've completely abandoned you. So I think that quote has always
Yeah.
sort of stuck to me in some way or another. That, hey, if I lend someone money and I never see them again, then that's all it took to get rid of a scumbag out of my life, which is cheap, right?
Exactly. There's a reason. There's a reason why that person didn't pay me back. Absolutely. And I think as
Yeah,
well, that was a big thing. Like, the positive. We could talk about the positive, when we were all used to, sort each other out, and uh, dig each other out when it was time to go out and stuff. But there was these kind of negative, situations or scenarios where friends were, because we weren't incredibly wealthy. We were kids. We were students. We weren't working full time like we are now. So there were kind of times where money wasn't returned, and relationships were definitely strained. Um, but at the end of the day, we were kids. But in this
yeah,
day and age now, because we're both 30 and thriving, as they say,
Dirty and dirty,
Well,
yeah.
you're, yeah, absolutely. But what kind of, have any examples or stories happened to you recently where, relationships have been strained that, the excuse of being a kid just didn't suffice?
I think with your friends that you always want to believe in them. And if someone comes to you and they really need help, like people who you have met in the past and you've formed relationships with, whether that's kind of acquaintance level or a much personal connection, like you want to have that faith in people that I really need this for this project that I'm starting, or I really need this cash for this visa, or I really need this money for something. And you kind of say, well, do you know
Yeah.
what? You're trying to make yourself, trying to do something better. You're not going to spend it on waste it, and it's not gambling or it's not on anything else. So like, I'll give it to you. Of course, I'll give it to you. You're a close friend, and I want the best for you.
Yeah.
And recently we did have a situation where we were contacted by someone who we met years ago, who I met years and years ago, who I'm kind of friends with on Facebook and Instagram, and would comment the odd time and loosely keep in touch, but no real direct kind of conversations. So I was quite shocked when I got a message, like, was it last week or earlier this week, saying, "Hi Geoff, hope you're well. Congrats. Hope things are good in Panama. Look, I need to dig out. I need $300 for a visa. If I can't get my visa, I can't get my job, and I can't move to my new country." And I know this person a long time. We worked together, and I was so taken aback. Firstly, because they haven't been in touch, and I
Yeah.
don't know whether that's an
That was going to be
indictment
a
of how
question. Yeah.
desperate they were, right? I mean, are they so desperate that they're combing through a friends group of old friends? And then you think about, like, there's so many psychological impacts that go into your head as the person who's been asked. I think the first one that came into my head is actually frustration. Like, if
Yeah.
you're in need, why are you contacting me on the deadline? If we're such good friends, feel comfortable and open to come and talk to me about anything personal, financial, or what have you. So I think the first thing was there was a frustration there. And then you start to think, okay, well, what's happening in this person's life that they don't have the ability to gather the $300 to get their visa for their new job? And why is there no other resource that they have that's legitimate, like a bank or any other particular way? So you start to go through these situations, and you discuss it with your partners or you discuss it with your close friends, and ultimately we didn't actually, I didn't feel comfortable. I spoke to them. I said, hey, look, I don't know if this is something necessarily that I think I want to do. Can you give me some more context? And then they just said, no, it's completely fine. Don't worry. I've got it sorted. Cheers. Good luck. And then never heard from them. Haven't heard from them since, despite having followed up and not
Mm,
saying, hey, did you get over? Did you get the visa? Where's the new job? So again, the emotional challenges, like as a kid, if someone asks you for 50 quid, you say, hey, here's 50 quid. You're not thinking, why are they asking me? What's the understanding? Because
yeah.
when everyone's an adult, you try and actually put yourself in their perspective a hell of a lot more. Um,
Yeah.
and then yeah, as I said, haven't heard from them since. So I do hope they got over if they're listening. I mean, I hope they got there. I hope they got their visa. I hope everything went well for them. But my advice would be, um, stay in contact with people who you care and who you trust about and who you want to be confiding things in, because finances tear people apart very easily. And
Absolutely.
we've
Yeah.
seen people come and go, and as I said, if it only cost X amount to get rid of them, whatever. But this wasn't that scenario. It was somewhat different, and as I said, I hope that person the best. But it was an unusual situation to be placed in, especially when it's like a Tuesday afternoon and you're not even thinking about
Yeah.
it.
Well, first and foremost, fair play to you for getting back to that person. I know a lot of people that would have just been, like would have seen that. I don't know how I would have reacted. I mean, if I saw that, I wouldn't have responded straight away. I would have been initially a bit taken aback. I would have initially been pissed off, is the
Mm.
honest thing, because you are, it sounds to me as if this person kind of just sprayed the walls, hoping that something would stick. It wasn't as if they were like, I'm only going to ask Geoff, and that's going to, I think it sounded like he or she requested this, loan off a few people, and someone just kind of got back to them sooner. Do you kind of smell that from the situation?
I do, unfortunately, and the question is, like, how much did they actually need? It wasn't like a
Yeah.
personalized message or anything, um, and then you just hope that they're not in real trouble in any way. But yeah, again, you feel, not to play the victim. I didn't feel like a victim in any way, shape, or form. I would have helped if I had even heard more from them or had more context.
Yeah.
Um, But these are the sort of dilemmas that you have and you face when you're a little bit older. Um, but ultimately, decision was made for me. They didn't come back to me. They didn't hear back. I had in my head I would still, if roles were reversed, or not roles reversed rather, but if I was in the same position to do the same thing again, I think I would still
Yeah.
proceed in the same way. I would say, hey, is everything okay? What is the situation? I haven't heard from you in a really long time. You're out. You're doing things. You're active. It's not like you've been a hermit or haven't been doing different things. So it is a surprise and a bit of a shock. But
Does this person work? Like, if they're like, in this day and age, 300 isn't a huge sum of money to, maybe it is to be asking of someone, but not to acquire in your own right. Do you think this person is suffering financially, or did they just,
it's tough to say. I don't think you ever really know, do you, what goes on in the
yeah,
background, and I think it happens a lot. And I suppose I know I've just said it, but social media can say one thing, and the reality can
yeah,
be an entirely other situation. So even like now, live talking about it, I do try and reflect and put myself in their position and say, okay, well, yeah, you were doing that on social media, but you might have been doing it. You might be doing it for the wrong reasons, and trying to live up to certain expectations, or meeting people for the final time. Like, again, having someone who's moved abroad a lot,
yeah.
and like, I think people are sick of going to Jeff's going away parties because there's been so many of them at this point.
Yeah. I've been to a few
Like,
of them. They've all been very fun.
they've all been very fun. Well, of course, they're fun. I can understand, like, you want to have that final send off with your friends, and maybe you've overdone it, or maybe something's happened, or there could be hospital bills. You don't know. Things can be
Yeah.
for a whole number of reasons. So,
And tell me this, living abroad for so long as well. Like, how long are you abroad now? So gone from,
Florida for a year, and then I came back
yes.
for 6 months, 4 months. So I came back for four
Yeah.
months, and then moved to London for 2 years. Was in Dublin for 18 months, and I've been in Panama for 18 months.
Did you ever feel any kind of fear, or did anything ever happen where you were struggling financially? You don't have to go into any of the details, but is there kind of a level of fear when living abroad and not having the safety net that we mentioned before? Is there always kind of that underlying fear of, I really cannot mess this up?
I have two stories. One's a funny story, and then the other one's a little bit more serious. The funny one is quite fun. So when I was living in Spain, which is when I was much younger, I was like 21 or 22, um,
Yeah.
and I was actually working. I got a job teaching English randomly, and like there was a Spanish festival on, or Spanish, like, religious festival, which they turned into huge types of festivals all over the country. And we went out. We went out too many days in a row, and I was like fully had €20 left for the rest of the week. And I was playing rugby with the team at the time, and literally told them this. I was like, "Oh, I'll be on pan y agua, like bread and water for the week." But like in my head, I was fully having bread and water for the week. Like I did it for
Yeah.
2 or 3 days. I only was able to buy bread and bottled water, like that, or bread and water. That was it.
Yeah.
And then like trained on a Tuesday, trained on a Thursday. On Thursday, they're like, "How's the bread and water?" I was like, "No, like that's literally all I have." And then the
Yeah.
team rallied together and gave me some food. But I was like, "No, no, it's fine. It's no big deal." Like, you don't really think about it, and you can see how quickly you could like normalize that situation as well. So
It's
that was,
just the lack of protein that is kind of unsettling
yeah,
about that whole scenario.
yeah,
Definitely when you're trying to play rugby as well, where you're just
yeah.
kind of just carbohydrates and H2O. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how long that would have lasted.
They still message me, like they would message me on Instagram or whatever. They'd say like, how's the bread and water diet going for you, bro?" and all this stuff. So like that was a funny version of it, and that was born
Yeah.
out of not wanting to ask my parents for cash, and saying like, can I actually survive on 20 euros for the whole week?
Yeah.
And try and just testing yourself, right? Second time around, and look, it was funny. I suppose it makes for a good story. But the second time around was more recently, and it wasn't even like, wasn't at the time. I didn't feel like it was kind of like you're financially struggling, but living in London, it's very easy to let things run away from you. Like there's a huge, like it's very much the European style of any city of excess that you would see in the US. And
Yeah.
I was trying to save, you do your best to save and try and put like little bits and bobs away, because the end goal at the time was trying to buy somewhere in Ireland, which is, like, thinking about that now is crazy, but I was
Yeah.
so young to try and think about
Absolutely.
buying a house. That's the process that in my head I had. So again,
Yeah.
again, I was working kind of full-time wages, or what I would consider to be graduate wages, but full-time.
Hmm.
My own fault. Booked a holiday a month beforehand. Spent too much, and then by the time the paycheck came around, again, I was literally so short for a week, living with people, but too afraid to kind of speak up and say anything, and eating like whatever leftovers I had in my fridge and my freezer, and kind of keeping it to the bare bones of what I could get in the discount aisles in Asda. And to be honest, all I was doing was protecting my own ego, which looking back on it is stupid, because the reality is I was living with people. Any of them would have put out their hand and helped me. But
Yeah,
it was my own naivety, my own ego, my own, I should be able to fend for myself. And of course, you can't do it all the time. It's like I was an idiot and I spent too much money, but you shouldn't be afraid to ask for help either, with people who you know. And as I said, people who you can confide in.
absolutely. And that's a good contrast as well to your story about the friend that reached out looking for the 300 quid. Because while something as, abrupt as, reaching out, having that request, as opposed to actually just asking for help because you need it, because you need to eat.
Mm.
Um, I think it's a way easier loan to say yes to than having to kind of, see someone who's popping out of the ground and having to give them money.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's like, I'll provide you with food, but I won't. So and they're the kind of two times since then. I mean, thankfully, I've been fortunate over the last 2 years, being in a good job, that I'm able to make better financial decisions and plan better, and the income is certainly more guaranteed than it had been, particularly when I was bartending or when I was teaching English back in those days. So from that perspective, you learn, because once you're receiving an income like that, you're like, okay, well, now I can actually start planning it. And what does planning look like? And you
Yeah.
start to educate yourself in whether you're building templates for saving, or whether you're building how. I've seen like loads of different rules. There's the 50, 30, 20. There's the 10%. Like, there's all these different theories on it. I think the one theory I've
Yeah.
tried to adopt is no matter, I had a happy life when I lived in different parts of the world. And like, you think about how little you were able to have success and joy. I mean, success, not financial. I mean, just like success. Like, a day would be so much fun, and you wouldn't need to necessarily spend a whole truckload of money. And it's like, how do you think back to how happy something used to make you, and whether do you need to then do loads more in excess to get that same reaction? I don't necessarily think you do. So, looking at like simple things, and I think being in Panama is, you can get a lot of joy from the simple things. You can go for, a dip in the sea. You can go for a beach walk. You can go for a hike in the jungle.
The
I mean,
weather
these are things
helps so
that,
much,
yeah, the weather helps hugely. And that's always something
especially
that,
being Irish, something we'll never
especially
take for
being
granted.
Irish.
Thank you so much for chatting to me today. It's great to catch up and to share your stories with all of the listeners of the Chirp. Any final words of wisdom?
Again, I think back to like when we were young in 2008, and we didn't have a whole lot of guidance in terms of what to do financially, and what like any sort of financial planning could look like. And a lot of it's now kind of self-taught. I mean, my mum she worked in the bank, but her best
Mm.
effort was like, don't get a credit card. Do get a credit card. Don't spend too much on the credit card. But what I suppose I recommend people to do is listen to podcasts about finance, understand people's stories, understand the highs and lows. There's a whole plethora of really good material out there that you can audio watch on YouTube, you can listen to in podcast form. So, I mean, that's the main thing, right? Like, knowledge, understanding the power that you do have. It just makes people have better informed financial decisions, which in the long run, once you have the first step to security is understanding what you're able to, what your bargaining position or your position is financially. So that's how I always felt. And that would be my final kind of tidbit or token of advice.
Well, that was a lovely trip down memory lane for me, to say the least. Always nice chatting about the college days when money was scarce, the recession was in full swing, and we all had to work together and help each other out financially to create those lovely nighttime memories. One thing I realised from chatting to Geoff is that these awkward stories of people looking for money from you They never go away. These traits that people have, they don't get eliminated or eradicated by age or maturity. If you have money, there's always going to be people that are looking for it and trying to get it off you. And as Geoff said, the technology wasn't even in place when we were in college to lend each other money efficiently. Cash had to swap hands. We had to be there in person, or we had to wait 2 days for a bank transfer to go through. We didn't even have smartphones at the beginning back then. Then fast forward to Geoff's pal, who asked for a sizable loan. Nothing to break the bank with, but a cheeky amount to ask for nonetheless. And I'd have to agree with Geoff when I said that it wasn't something that I'd be comfortable with. It wasn't a scenario that I'd want to be in anyway. But should Geoff have succumbed to his friend's wishes and lent that person the money, at least in this day and age, the technology exists where Geoff could lend that person the cash, get it done in a safe and structured way, make sure that it comes back over a specific period of time, and even add on some interest as well if you wanted. Technology has changed everything, and compared to when me and Geoff were students, I think our money can be a little bit safer. There's always risk, there's always risky characters, but a lot has changed in the last 10 years to ensure that financial transactions are just better. That's it for the Chirp today. Again, thank you so much for watching and listening and showing us the love. We appreciate all your support, so please give us a follow and a review so that we can keep it going for you. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a third story. So until then, take care.